Welcome to Conversation Mill. Join me as I talk to individuals stepping out to pursue their passions, from small business owners to community leaders, and learn with me how we can work together to support our local communities and local economies. Visit conversationmill.com to learn more, but now please join us in conversation. What is better than a massage? Not much in my book. But what makes a massage truly great is when it begins to solve ongoing pain points. But for a massage to do that, you need a practitioner that is focused on making the experience client-specific, and that is what Johanna Davis, owner of True North Wellness, does. Jo uses her True North brand to provide individualized healing experiences for her clients, and it does not stop with massage. Jo is a certified yoga instructor and teaches throughout the Greenville area, but also provides individual yoga classes and Reiki healing. It is easy if you are a newcomer or even someone like myself who has taken yoga on and off for years to be overwhelmed by the language of yoga or the fast-paced poses or the Eastern spiritual teachings that some instructors can lean heavy on and be made to feel like you don't belong on that mat. But Jo reminds us over and over to keep it simple. I asked Jo to come and have a conversation with me because she is one of the few, if not the only, yoga teachers that has made me feel like I'm safe and I'm doing it right, even when I'm doing it wrong. Jo creates an environment in each of her different practices that observes and asks, what does the individual client need? She has the unique ability to create a yoga class that appeals to a wide array of individuals, yet makes it feel like it might have been tailored for you. If you are a yogi or if you have never attempted a downward dog, I think you will appreciate this conversation with the owner of True North Wellness and learn a new perspective on massage and yoga that you have not heard before. Please join us in conversation. Your small business, your massage practice, your yoga is called True North Wellness.
Yes.
Why did you call your business True North Wellness?
When I was going through the very long process of trying to choose a name, one of the things that I kept coming back to was if I pick a specific name that defines, I guess, a direction that somebody might not align with, then it was hard for me because I guess in my practice, it's very client-centered. So every massage looks different. Every yoga class looks different. One of the hardest questions for me when yoga studios ask me to teach is, what's your favorite kind of class to teach? And I can't answer that because I'm very accustomed to teaching to the students in the room. So when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, how do I say your healing will look how you will define it, not how I will define it, in a succinct way without saying, this is the definition of my healing place. And if you don't align with this, then you don't belong here. So I didn't want to give off that feeling. And I wanted people to realize that they are the bigger part of their healing journey than I am. And especially, at least for the massage part, a lot of people, I think, come to a massage thinking, I'm going to completely help fix, for lack of a better term, their body. And, 95% of what's going to help improve their body are choices they make. So when I was looking at names, I was just thinking that I needed to pick something that would be different for every person, but everyone would feel like, oh, I get what that means because they have a definition for them.
Yeah.
And then also in my yoga training, when I graduated, the instructors give you a Sanskrit name. And the name they picked for me was Sarala, which means straight, direct, and to the point. What you see is what you get. And if you know me, that's for better or worse who I am. And so it kind of aligned with who I am as a person too, that it's just a direct center. What you see, what you get from me is going to be honest and true and straight to the point and help people on their journey, but honor that it's their journey. It's not my journey.
To me, that name sounds very homey and comfortable. So it just makes it made me feel comfortable the first time I identified that with being you. I mean, I'd been to your yoga classes and so then when I connected it to you, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Cause you do make people feel comfortable in your classes. When I hear True North, plus I'm from the North. So I think that word just identifies home, safety, comfortable. Mm-hmm. You mentioned your practice being client-centered. So when it comes to yoga and teaching yoga classes, how do you create a client-centered class with multiple people in the room?
Specifically for yoga?
Yes.
Okay. It's kind of a process, but it's a process that happens naturally at this point. Mm-hmm. A lot of it, or how I was taught to teach a client-centered class, is to watch each person kind of as they come in, not in a creepy way, but like you notice how they're moving, you notice how comfortable they are, you notice how comfortable they are on their mat when they first sit down, where they choose to go in the room. So I just kind of try to notice that about people while they're coming in. I also try to talk to people while they're coming in and see their comfort level as they're speaking to me. But from there, generally within the first, at the beginning of a yoga class is for me always the same. I was taught to start with a time in, where we take a breath, allow ourselves to be in that present moment and nowhere else. And that takes a moment to honor that space that you're creating, that separate space from your day. And no matter what, that's going to look the same for everybody, unless they need to sit differently. And then from there, within a few moments of the first few movements of class, I can kind of see what the breadth of experience is in the room. So I think that it's important. And one of the things that seems like a very silly thing, but is very helpful for people, if you say the name of the posture first.
Yeah.
Because then your more experienced people are going to go ahead. Your other people, if they don't know what it is, then they're going to listen to you for your cueing. Another thing is just to set up a space where everybody feels comfortable to move as they want to. And so I try to repeat things like, this is your practice, not my practice. If you want to come into a different posture, go ahead and come into it. Different things like that.
Talking about that ability to look over the class and see people at different levels, and then also look across the class and see people that are probably approaching the practice for different reasons, whether it's that is their spirituality, is very Eastern religion. Maybe this is part of their spiritual practice. Other people who are doing it from just a pure fitness perspective, others who are maybe dragged there by someone else. So you're looking out over the room over probably a very diverse group, I would assume,
Yes.
for a lot of classes. What have you experienced with seeing these different people come in for different reasons into your class, and how does that shape the entire class? Because it's kind of like diversity in a community where you have all these different people coming in and you have to work together. And in yoga, I've been in some rooms where I'm just like, man, this energy is so bad. And I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's, I'd like to be like, it's the people around me. It's someone in this room.
Of course it's not me.
Or is it me? But like you have that, like you can have that really bad energy by one or two people brought into that space. So I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that diversity that comes into that yoga room every time you teach.
So one of the most important lessons that I took away from yoga teacher training was that you have to deal with your own shit, for lack of a better term. I don't know if I'm supposed to.
You can swear. Yeah.
Because you're going to be triggered, and your own issues are going to be triggered by so many different people in the room. And it might not be about them. It might not be about you. And so as you learn to look at the room and see that, I guess I would say two things. One is there's an importance to creating space for people to experience whatever they're going to experience. And the more comfortable the instructor is with that space, the more comfortable the class will be. And it's not always a spoken thing. It can just be body language and how a certain scenario is handled in a class. It can be a lot of times, I think, how the instructor notices and adjusts and doesn't apologize for their own body. and that you can cue a posture that you can't do. And just that in itself is creating a space where someone else subconsciously is thinking, oh, well, she didn't do it, I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Also not getting sucked into this isn't my practice, it's their practice. So not getting sucked into having to model the hardest posture, I guess.
Yeah.
So when you have a large, diverse class, depending what they're coming for, if you a lot of times model the least challenging posture, then people will be more comfortable with that. So also it's creating space, I think, for all sorts of energy in the room, that you're on your own mat and you don't need to focus on anybody else's. So I think a lot of it is just the teacher. And I don't know exactly how. I relate a lot back to the classroom because I was a school teacher, and the fact that I have students with every ability level, every age level, every socioeconomic, I guess, status, and we have to come together and work cohesively and respect each other.
Yeah.
And so the way that the instructor models and is okay with creating that space for everyone to be there and letting everyone have their own experience.
At the beginning of your answer, you said, like, as a teacher, you have to deal with your own shit.
Yeah.
To handle all those energies in the room. Can you elaborate on that?
I think that for me, and I've had people say this to me when they say, I love to practice yoga, but I don't want to teach, because if I teach, then the pressure is on me to be perfect or to create this experience or, whatever. So I think for me, I remember my very first yoga class. I came in and there was probably the most experienced person that I was going to teach. Sorry. The first yoga class I taught ever, just done with training. Probably the most experienced yoga practitioner that I had ever been around. And then somebody who had never taken a class ever in their life. And that was all, just the two of them. And I was thinking, how on earth am I going to make this a successful experience and a good experience for both of these people? So that triggered a lot for me. And I really had to make peace with the fact that what I offer them, they're going to take away what they need to take away. And if they leave triggered, that's their shit, not mine. And they probably needed to be triggered that day or whatever in their own way on their own journey. Yeah. So I had to deal with a lot of feelings of inadequacy and insecurity before stepping in front of a class, because I never was this highly athletic instructor who could who could physically show and cue very difficult, high achieving, if we want to call it that, which is one of my biggest pet peeves, but postures,
right.
That kind of the glorified postures. Mm-hmm. So for me, I had to accept the fact that every person is there for a reason, and they're going to take away what they need to take away. And I can offer what I have to offer. And that is all. And to make peace with that is difficult.
It's difficult to make peace with it for me as, how would I describe my current yoga practice? Casual. I'm casually found on the mat. Like if someone's like a social smoker or something, right. Like I'm kind of like a social yogi. I do like to do it, and I will like tie it into maybe my week's workout where I'll like do some warrior poses and some down dogs and some planks and tie it into part of my stretching and along with my workout or my runs for the week. But I'm not a member of a studio. So it's hard for me to be on my mat and, like you said, kind of deal with that shit. Why am I being triggered by the person next to me, sending me over the edge? And so like, I get that, what you're saying about everyone maybe being triggered or going through their own process and their own mat and showing up for a different reason. And I feel like when I show up for all the reasons, a little bit of all the reasons,
right?
Physical, spiritual, learning how to not be triggered to the person on my right or left.
Or to be triggered and be okay with it.
Yeah. And like learning that patience and that, like working through that. But why did you go into yoga? What did you want to get out of it when you made yoga such a large part of your life by becoming an instructor?
So speaking of trying to control your mind, when I first found yoga, I guess, I had just moved home from Boston. I lived in Boston for a stint, and I had moved home to Pennsylvania. And in order to leave Boston, I needed to quit my job. So I was jobless. And then through a interesting turn of events, like a series of unfortunate events, I also was homeless for a bit. My car was totaled and my phone was destroyed. So I had very little in my life.
Yeah.
So I kind of came home and was going through a difficult time. I had just gotten out of an abusive relationship, and I found a power yoga DVD. And I would do that periodically in my living room.
Yeah.
Much like you kind of mentioned, just fitting it in whenever I could. And then I was in therapy at the time, and my therapist told me you need to do at least a half hour of exercise every day. That's your homework. Well, that power yoga DVD just happened to be 30 minutes. So I said, well, I can stay safely in my apartment. This is what I choose. So I chose that for a bit, and then, typical to my personality, thought, oh, I should just go to become a teacher. There's why do anything in between? Surely I could go right from this VHS tape to instructing. So I just did a little Google search, and there happened to be a school from Long Island that was creating a satellite school in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And so I decided to sign up for training. And it was really through the training. I always say going through a yoga training is going to change your life in ways that you never expected, and has nothing to do with the asanas or the postures on the mat, which is why kind of what you were saying about, being triggered by the people next to you, or the teacher feeling like she or he has to control the entire group of people. None of that's going to happen. So yoga is really about calming or slightly stilling the mind and not controlling it, and just softening the edges. And so allowing it to be. And so I think that at that time in my life, I needed a place to soften the edges and allow my mind to be. And through yoga training, I realized how much yoga is part of my everyday life, whether or not I'm on the mat. And that's how it became so pervasive, I guess.
How hard was that, going into that teacher training and getting into the middle of it?
It was very hard for me because I was walking into a room of people who had these, as we were talking about, these well-developed, I guess we'll say, for lack of a better term, physical yoga practices. And I was kind of walking in with my VHS tape, which I keep saying and dating myself. But so for me, it was very hard to walk into that room and think that I belonged there. But the yoga training that I went through, at least, was a lot of stripping away of those layers and bringing out the joy and the safety in your practice and in your mat, rather than the pressure to perform or the need to check it off the list for the day.
I'm glad you brought that up. Can you kind of delineate between this physical yoga practice and this like spiritual side of the practice, or this mindfulness side of the practice?
Sure. So I think that what we've done in America, and, I'm no major yoga leader, but just having been in it for some time, is we've kind of taken something and really complicated it.
That sounds about right.
Because, people will say, I could never meditate. I can't sit still for that long, or I could never, I'm not flexible, so I can't do yoga, or, whatever it is. And my yoga instructor used to always say, if you came to the mat and you breathed, you did yoga. And I loved that because a lot of it is getting there and giving yourself space. And the difference between the physical, I think it depends on people's spiritual beliefs, but I think it could actually be broken into three, right? Your physical, your mental, mindful, breath, and then your spiritual, depending on how much of that you bring into the practice for yourself. So the mindfulness section might just be slowing down enough to notice where in your body you feel your breath. And notice that you can then change your breath. And when you change your breath, you can change your emotion, or at least allow space for the emotion that you're feeling and not allow it to completely control you. It can just be a part of who you are, not who you are. If we had 3 yoga blocks, if you could imagine them in your head, one of the things that we say when we teach yoga ed is you take out these yoga blocks and you kind of scatter three of them all around. And you say to your students, your younger students, this is your body, this is your breath, and this is your mind. And if you walked into a room like this, how do you think you're feeling? So you can imagine the things that they say. And then you take the body block and you stack it. And then on top of that, put the breath. And then on top of that, the mind. And then you ask them, now that these are aligned, body, mind, breath, or body, mind, spirit, depending, how do you think you feel? Whereas one works to help the other, because sometimes we need our body to get out of our heads and into our breath.
Yes.
But I think the key is not getting attached to any one of them, because it's not attachment, really.
No, thank you for that picture language with the blocks, because that makes sense. And the emotion part of it is, and I think you and I have talked about this before, but there's that book, Body Keeps the Score. And that's so true. Like, we hold so much emotion in our body. And I know I've experienced being on my mat and doing a posture and being like, I'm not going to cry in this room of 30 people. Ruh-roh, like, what happened? Or, or, oh my gosh, like, I'm getting really angry. This like egg of angry just broke open in my body, and it's working its way up to the top of my head, almost like letting it break open, burn out, and then being like, okay, I'm back on my mat. I'm not angry about something I don't even know. Do you have any examples for yourself or stories of being on your mat and having that experience?
Yes. Many, many, many classes. So for me, there have been so many times, I don't know that I could recall a specific instance and paint that specific picture for you, but generally when I come to my mat and I have a physical release of emotion, whether anger or crying, those seem to be the two.
Yeah, it is. It's never like joy. It's never.
I do have joy too, but I guess we don't think about it, right? No. We mark the sadness more than we mark the joy. Yeah, I think a lot in our world.
No, you're right. Yeah,
and remembering to mark the joy just as much is hard. Yeah. So, but yes, I've definitely. Generally, it's breaking down in Shavasana. A lot of times yoga instructors walk around and give like a little head massage or something like that. And multiple times it's been as soon as that yoga instructor puts their hands on my shoulders, I just start sobbing. So that's one. Yeah. Or for a lot of anger, or especially in the beginning of my yoga practice, I had a lot of anger, and I just would come to my mat to be angry. That was my place to be angry because it was safe. So instead of thinking of it as a negative thing as a positive thing. This is my place where I can come do 4,700 sun salutations and, plank push-ups in between and really let it all out. But the hardest thing for me was seeing that the yoga practice you crave, oftentimes you need the opposite. So I was coming to my mat angry and doing all this power yoga when really I probably needed softness and gentleness for myself.
Yeah. Mind, body, spirit practices can be intimidating for high-strung, high-stress people. I tend to be one of these people. I'm just going to call myself out this whole podcast. I'm okay with it. And also for perfectionists, which our society is creating, especially like a lot of us have worked or are working in corporate settings where the more work you get done, the better you're looked at or the better it reflects on your record. I put in this many hours. Oh, I put in this many hours. So there's like this perfectionist workaholic thing in our society. And then we go and we do something like yoga or meditation and we want to be perfect at it. And then when we find out we're not, it becomes stressful. And then we become competitive about it. And so can you identify with this? And then also, how do you coach students like this through this?
So first of all the yes. I think that mostly growing up here in America, most of us can relate. And I'm not saying other countries don't, but I can only speak to how I grew up.
Yes.
And so I think many, many, many of us have this, the more things you check off your list, the more perfect you become. That's where you feel achievement, I guess, or success or whatever it might be. So, and definitely that's a lot of why I came to yoga teacher training or started yoga. And for a long time, that defined my practice. If I could find the perfect alignment or the perfect cues or that sort of thing, then I would be the perfect teacher, of course, right? But obviously, being a massage therapist, alignment is important to me, and safety and anatomy and all those things are very important to me, but also learning that I think what I would tell myself, what I do tell myself and what I would tell anyone else is that we think there is perfect, but there isn't. And so I know that a lot of times I just feel like I might say one thing in a different way, but I just keep kind of saying the same thing. But it's true.
Yeah.
In that I think a lot of times we need the repetition of these kinds of statements to bring them into our mind, because there was a repetition of all the other, the perfection. This is how you get ahead. This is how you, that was trained to us just as much on a repetitive scale, I guess, way more is what I'm saying than what I'm trying to say. That like these things were repeated to us so much through television, parents, commercials, just physical, the things we looked at, the things we saw. And so I think I would continue to repeat to someone, and I do, we think there is a perfect, but there isn't. And when you're coming to your mat, you're coming and you can just start with one thing. Right. Oftentimes when I have people come to me and they're like, oh, I really love a home practice. Okay. So let's pick one thing you can do. Just one. And when I say one, I mean, can you wake up every day and do one sun salutation A? That is all.
Yeah.
That's all I want from you. And let's do that until it becomes part of your day that you love, that you can't live without. And if one day you wake up and you're like, I can't even do one, then just sit down. Find a mindful spot. Take 3 breaths. That's it for today, right? Like, I think the last thing we need is one more thing to do. The last thing we need is one more thing to check off our list. The last thing we need is one more thing to become. So let this be a place of undoing. A lot of times I will take a time in when I come to my mat myself And I will say to myself as I'm breathing, what is it, with curiosity, that you need today, self?
Yeah.
And how can you provide that for yourself here? Do you need 20 minutes of angry sun salutations, or do you need, a restorative yoga posture where you're just sitting and breathing? And it doesn't even need to be coming to your mat. If I could teach someone a 3-part breath and say, hey, right before you fall asleep at night, why don't you do this 3-part breath until you stop doing it because you fell asleep or whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I would say. And then I would kind of like wrap it up with a little bow by saying, sit and pick an intention for yourself of what it is that you want this mindfulness practice to bring to your life. What's your intention? And in that way, I am blank. And then think of what would fill in that blank. And not something that you have to achieve to become, something you already believe that you can fill in that blank. But also, you would just like a little more of that in your world to soften the edges, to still the mind a little, not to control it. Write it on a piece of paper and then put it away. Hide it in a closet, something. Because otherwise, what will we do? We'll obsess over it, right? It's, I'm still not doing this. Shame on me as I see it taped on my bathroom mirror or whatever. And energy follows thought. Linking back to energy. A lot of times we'll set a path for ourselves just by saying, I am grounded. I am present. Whatever it is that works for that person, write it down, put it away. And a month later, when you find it, you might think, oh, you know what? Like without even thinking about it, I came to my mat and did sun salutations or whatever, any kind of posture. It doesn't have to be that. I just use that example, 5 times this month, and I didn't even put it on my day planner. So just that's generally how I work with clients and how I show up for myself. Is don't create one more thing. Don't turn this into one more to do. Let it be an energetic guiding of how you want your world to look. And my yoga teacher once said to me, I had my panties all in a bunch because of something. I don't remember even what it was now, but she said to me, hey, yoga comes into our life to support us, not to make it busier. So, you can just let it support you and however that might look today. And so that's kind of the feel. And again, it sounds like I'm repeating the same thing, but I am on purpose because the other messages are so repetitive in the world. So we need to start repeating these things. And how we do one thing is how we do everything. Right? Again, I think that sounds really silly, but if you think about it, how you get up in the morning, if you make your bed or you don't make your bed or whatever, is the same thing you do with your laundry basket, is the same thing you've done with your yoga props when you're done with them, is the same thing you do with, it's kind of how we look at everything. So if we can keep telling ourselves, there is no perfect, what's the energy I want to bring and create in my world?
It's so true. And I would maybe at a different point in my life be more skeptical of that and go, okay, yeah, if I think it'll happen.
This is way too simple.
This is like The Secret or something like, okay, like vision, whatever. But I will say this, and this episode is not about me and my yoga practice. I'm just referencing a lot because I don't mind using myself as an example, whether people see that good, bad, or otherwise. But I took, and I'm actually just connecting it as you're saying what you're saying. And I was like, oh, this is a real life example of what you're saying, which is I took your beginner's yoga mini intensive that we did every week, which it wasn't intensive. It was enjoyable. And I learned a lot. What I put on my card was I am present, because that's something that I am. I am present. I'm here. I'm showing up. I am already this thing, but I want more of it in my life. And so that then kind of spiraled into a mantra for this year. And then when I kind of got to a point in my year of I'm really stressed out, I'm living away from my partner, this is just a lot, and I kind of had a breaking moment, what came to my thoughts through my tears of I'm so stressed, I'm losing it a little bit, was I am present. Like, I need something more simple to be present. I need to shift more things in my life to be present. And being present makes my life simpler. And then I'm not standing here having a breakdown and I don't even know why. And so it was that tiny little practice of incorporating it into that class I took with you. And then when I would show up for yoga every time, that would be my intention, the same one, because I am trying to kind of empty my mind, and all I can think is that mantra I created, I am present. So
complicated.
I can't think of anything else. And I'm not going to waste my time thinking of anything else. But it did seep in more than I even knew, because I did set that intention and I let my energy kind of flow to that. So even though it took from February when we did that to May for me to kind of like start having it really punch through my thoughts, and really like that my be present really started to push through, it did impact and change the direction I was going for the positive. I mean, I feel the best I have in a really long time. And I would think other people around me hopefully see that too. But it is what you said, is as you were talking, like, wow, that is the process that just happened to me over the last 6 to 8 months.
It's wonderful.
By setting that one intention.
I love to hear that story. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think I said this earlier, that we by nature, I don't know if it's human nature, I don't know if it's here in this country, I don't know, but we want to complicate things in order to make them more simple.
Yeah.
And
you don't have to.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just more simple.
Yeah. More is always more, but
right.
like more is not better.
Right.
That's such a great pivot into your massage practice, because your massage practice is both relaxing and therapeutic. And from what I've observed, you have extensive knowledge of human anatomy and take the time to address specific muscles, really address the client specific needs of what they might be experiencing. Is this how you would describe your massage practice, or how would you describe your massage practice? And I'm calling it out because it's very different from other massage practices I've experienced in the past.
Right. So when I set up, linking back to True North and the reason I picked the name, and wanting each client to come there and start to be able to define a space and a knowledge and awareness of what's their true north, what is their healing, what are they looking to find. I guess the gap that I saw in my schooling and most places I've received massage, and I've received wonderful massages, I'm not saying that in a negative way, but a gap that I saw was that the therapist was the focal point, meaning you go, you tell your therapist, these are my things. And then they're like, okay, here's how I can fix that. So, and that's how we're trained. And I get that. But instead, I guess I would say what defines my massage therapy practice is that I take a lot more time for the intake portion, the first time I meet with a client. And I take that time, of course, to go over, sure, all the medical things. Obviously, it's part of your body. It affects everything that's happening on the table. I need to know things to keep you safe on the table.
Right.
But also, the more clients speak about their pain, and the more they speak about what defines a, I guess, successful, or what they would feel to be successful massage, or how they want to feel after, what they want their massage to look like, the more I can see and understand, similar to the yoga class, what is this person looking to get out of this? And also, what do they need from me? But it's about them, not me. So they don't come and experience my type of massage, right? They come and experience, hopefully, the massage they need.
Yeah.
And so no one massage from one client to the other looks the same. And for a lot of my regular clients, it changes drastically day to day when they come for an appointment. So I have some clients that have come very regularly for physical issues. You know, they come to me, they lift their arm as high as they can, and they say, that's it. That's as far as it's going. And so we're working on that to physically just get that arm to release and be able to move. And then they might come the next time and say, I need to just be on your table. And I need a place to just heal and to be, and you just do whatever it is that you know to do. And then we work from there. So I think that defines my practice, because I want to take the client's goals, have an outcome, and get to that outcome in the amount of time that or money that they have, because it is an exchange of energy, and in our culture that's money. So you know, that is happening there, and that's different for everybody. So whether that's one time or 6 times or whatever works for them.
What is, if anything, in your opinion, your responsibility as a yoga instructor, as a massage therapist, within this larger community? Right now we're in Greenville, South Carolina, but wherever you may be, what's your responsibility?
So I think my responsibility, well, one of many, is, I keep using this term, but creating space for people to heal and create a space where people can show up how they are. And so I believe that takes a certain level of comfort and calmness with my own things, emotions, scars, trauma. And when there is a level of comfort with my own things, people feel free for their difficulties or struggles or joys, as we need to highlight those more, to be shown. So I think that there is this place of not trying to portray a picture of perfection as a yoga instructor or a massage therapist, to be able to say, I made a mistake, or, you know, this, I don't do this part very well, so I apologize to you. Thank you for your patience and tolerance while I'm also human. So
I really appreciate when you're trying to figure out right and left. Because I'm always like, man, I'm supposed to remember right and left while clearing my mind. I can't do both.
Yes, that is my nemesis. One of them in teaching classes is
forgetting which side I'm on. Very safe.
So I think that's one thing. I think another thing is creating a space to bring people together. I specifically chose at some point to not teach at a studio when I moved to Greenville. I looked into a couple, but I specifically chose not to, because I think that there is a need for human connection, sometimes outside of those preset norms, where a lot of people say, oh, I moved here, I joined a yoga studio because that's what I do. I joined a yoga studio and that's where I fit. But there's or whatever, insert in yoga studio, anything else, CrossFit, whatever it is you do. You know, people have their things, but there's a need for something else, another place to get together and rub shoulders with people who aren't of your, you know, you might not be friends with in the wild. So I do think that's some of my responsibility too. And then a lot of my massage practice, I feel my responsibility to the community is for people to know that that there's hope for their healing, and it's not going to be a straight line. That healing is often a journey, and their physical, mental, and emotional being is a part of it. So it might not just be me rubbing out the knot in your shoulder. It could be you're hanging on to a lot of emotional tension in your shoulder or whatever it is.
So true.
And so I think that is another responsibility. And then lastly, in this one, in the spirit of being human and real, I haven't figured out yet how to make yoga and massage, because it is healing, more accessible for everybody, because it's not, it's kind of a it seems to be a middle to higher socioeconomic status thing. And so how do we, knowing that it's still my business and, you know, I can't do everything for free, but how do I make it more accessible? Not even just monetarily, but approachable.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons why I decided to teach yoga in a brewery.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that's a silly example, but it's an affordable class and it's a place where if you're terrified to walk into a studio, you might walk into a brewery.
It's totally approachable. And I don't drink beer, like just unflavored regular beer. I don't drink it. I don't like it. But, well, one, there's other things for me to drink there. But Tetrad Brewery, we're talking about in Greenville.
Even non-alcoholic.
Yeah, and non-alcoholic. So there is an option for me. But the setting is... It actually covers a lot of what you were just talking about your responsibilities to the community of rubbing shoulders with people you might not be friends with in the wild. And then, but also creating a comfortable space to sit afterwards and talk with people that you might not usually talk with. Because, yeah, a lot of people show up with friends, but there's been a couple of times where I've shown up solo and then had amazing conversations with people that Sharita, who was on this podcast with Yatra Sisters, was there one week and we ended up talking for 2 hours. Not only did I get the physical and sort of mindfulness practice that day for myself on my mat, but then I got this great intellectual conversation, created a friendship over one beer on a Saturday afternoon. Right. So it creates that space to rub elbows with people that maybe you wouldn't deliberately seek out in your day-to-day life.
Right. And I don't think as adults we get a lot of chance to do that because we typically go to an event with people we know doing something we're comfortable doing.
Yes.
And so if we can take those events and make them a little more diverse or different. And
someone else mentioned on this podcast about not being afraid of the other, like not being afraid to talk to a stranger or someone who's different than you. And that's very hard. And I'm an introvert. So I got 1 or 2 good conversations in me per day.
Right.
Especially if I'm being present with you, because it's going to take my energy to feel your energy and have a good conversation. Right. So for me, I have to work hard to step out of my comfort zone and talk to a stranger in line while I'm waiting for my beer after yoga. Right. That's going to be an energy drain.
Right.
But in a positive way.
Yeah. A lot of people ask why I don't offer massage on Saturdays. And, you know, one of the reasons is our family's schedule. But the other reason is, well, every other Saturday I teach yoga here. And it's a goal of mine that I don't just go teach, leave, but that I try to stay and talk to different people afterwards and create a space of community where it's obvious that other people are staying and talking. And, you know, it's not kind of like, well, I have to go with somebody because otherwise there's no one to talk to. Or whatever. So
you're a world traveler. You and your husband are world travelers. How does that influence your work?
So many ways. So I guess long before I traveled, I made a commitment to myself when I was becoming a yoga instructor that I would not become the yoga instructor who thinks she's got the way, that the way I teach is best, or, you know, that kind of thing. And so I made a commitment to myself and it was a suggestion from our yoga teacher training to go to as many different types of classes as possible. And I made a commitment to myself that I would always learn one thing from a yoga instructor. I would always take one thing away. And so I think that is what propelled me to, when I travel, expand it to, I'm not just here to see to check off the tourist attractions, but to actually talk to the people who live here. And we've made a lot of friends when we've traveled. We've gone back multiple times to certain places. And I think that what I've been able to do or what I've enjoyed doing is letting traveling take me outside my comfort zone, and then learn something that I could apply. So taking a yoga class in a different language.
Yeah.
I always try to take yoga classes wherever I go, because if there's one thing that I've really learned that's brought me comfort, is that we are so different, but we're so alike. Right? And it's not because of the yoga studio world per se, because I've gone to a lot of different types of yoga studios when I've traveled, but in the same way that their customs are different than ours, they're still so similar. They're just a different translation of them.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it's reminded me how connected we are despite our differences, and to honor that, and to learn from it and continue reminding myself and others that, just like I said before, when we get into this in our mind, that everything has to be perfect and we have to control everything, and we're trying to soften the edges and broaden our way of thinking instead of control and constrict it, that traveling's the same. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Not to oversimplify again, but as I've traveled, I've learned to soften my edges, to be more open to whatever is different in that world than the world I live in. And also, if there's another thing that travel has taught me, that directly applies to, I think, yoga and massage, is I've become much more comfortable being who I am, and that's okay, that's different than other people. I was in a yoga class in Rotterdam. I just did not know what I signed up for. I had injured my SI joint, and I was having all these hip issues, and I signed up for this class, and this yoga instructor was, I just props to her, because she sat on the floor the entire time and taught this very difficult, very wonderful class, all from verbal cues, with never moving her own body and just talking to the class. And it was just this moment. But I, at a certain point, realized, I cannot do this. I will end up in pain. I can only go so far. So being that I knew my own practice, I just kind of threw in my own things and did my own things. So she came up to me after class, and she's like, I really got to hand it to you. I love how you just kind of were like, fuck you, I'm going to do whatever I want. I was like, oh, well, that's not really how I meant it. But okay. And she's like, no, I'm saying it as props. Like, thank you, she said to me, for being so comfortable with what you had to do for you, that you just did it. And I would say one thing and you'd be like, F that, I'm not doing that. And you do your own thing. And so I think traveling has also allowed me to kind of sink into the fact that this is who I am.
Oh, yeah.
And I can soften the edges, and I can broaden my perspective, and I can be kind and gentle with other people and make them feel, well, they're in charge of their emotions, but hopefully create a space where they will choose to feel accepted and loved. But I also, in that, it's not at the sacrifice of me. And I can still stand in my vertical of who I am. Body, mind, spirit metaphor, like the beginning, and say, okay, but this is also who I am. Yeah. And that there's a way that the world can meld that way, that we don't have to give up necessarily who we are in order to make space and be soft.
Yes.
For others.
Yeah, that's where my thoughts were going as you were talking about this, because it's weird, right? Because it seems so in line with our culture, but it also seems counterculture, because we're in this very me, individual culture, selfie culture, making our life look pretty on social media, or, in the metaverse now, and making it look like what it actually isn't, and like covering up the parts that we're trying to heal, like in the shadows, so people only see our shiny. But what you're describing is aligned with the culture, yet, like I said, also counterculture in, I'm going to be me. So I'm still pursuing that individual independent path, but in a way that is I'm healing myself unashamed in front of everybody. I'm doing what I want to do on my yoga mat because I'm focused on my yoga mat, and I'm standing in my truth and where I'm at. Which again, like I said, sounds, well, yeah, our culture's going that way anyways, but it's actually kind of counterculture to what we see because we're only trying to be shiny versus heal in front of people.
Yeah. And I think that's the other part that I was laughing. I forgot that she had said after. She said, what I appreciated about this other yoga instructor had said to me, what I appreciated was that you could do that in the most unobtrusive, like least interrupting, I know that's not correct grammar, but way.
Yeah.
That because you were so comfortable with it being different and stepping back into the parts of the class that you could do, that you didn't make the whole class all about you by allowing you to be you.
Yes.
There's a lot of different ways to say it.
Yeah.
So
to wrap up our conversation today, I wanted to ask you if you could sit down and have a conversation with one person, living or dead, who would that be? I'm happy that you're already smiling about it.
It's funny. I love this question and hate this question because I feel like a lot of people feel pressure to like choose someone. Well, I should say, it's sometimes pressure to choose someone, impressive or whatever. But so I've thought about it a lot. My husband and I like to play the question game a lot when we're traveling.
Yeah.
One of them, multiple variations, but one of them is you can ask 3 questions, but you both have to answer them. So you can ask anything in the world, nothing's off the table, but you have to answer the same question yourself. Anyway, so this is a question that comes up a lot. And my answers change, but by and large, the one person who keeps coming up is just my grandfather.
I love that.
Because I never got to meet him. He passed away when he was 40. And so my mom was 22, I believe. And just there is a sense of, learning where you come from. And, I got to meet all my other grandparents and have conversations with them. And not many, they lived far away, but I didn't get to meet him. And he was such a strong force in my mom's world. And my mom talks about him a lot and things she learned about him or from him and how he shaped her world. And he was the rock of their family and, all these things. And then him passing, what a hole that left for them. And so I just would really like to know what he was like. And the world that he experienced.
Are there any stories that you know about him really piqued your curiosity?
Yeah, he seems like he was a force to be reckoned with. So he was a lawyer, a big time lawyer in a very small community. And so to give some numbers or some idea of that, my mom, I think, had 200 or 300 people at her sweet 16 birthday party,
Wow.
So, he was big in the community, well known, all those things. And not that's just interesting to me because that's not how I grew up.
Right.
And so there's this whole different world that my mom experienced and this whole different world that he, in that time, my grandmother, she didn't have a job, she stayed at home. That's how things were. So just that he kind of led this whole life for them. And then he went into World War II. And I think my guess is he died of lung cancer. I'm guessing that there was some exposure there for him to pass away so young. So we had his flight records because he was a pilot. And I just remember, and there's this one picture of him standing on his plane and it says baby. He named the plane Baby because that's what he used to call my grandmother. And it's just, kind of the...
I love that. I love those stories.
Early American stories.
Family histories are so important, especially now that we know the stressors and the traumas that our ancestors experienced are expressed in the genes and the DNA that's passed down to us.
Yes. So it would be just neat to see his experiences, even just from flying planes in a war. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
But also down to, what was my mom like when she was little? Or my aunt and uncle.
Well, thank you so much for coming and being on the podcast today. And I really love the way the conversation went, because it was a lot of simplifying and kind of bringing things back to staying on your mat and just being present. And I think, like you said, we need that repetitiveness. And we haven't had that yet on this podcast. So I appreciate you bringing that energy and creating space for me and our listeners to embrace simple. So thank you for bringing that today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I have I'm just going to do a little reading for you. Let whatever you do today be enough. Let go of the judgment you have about what you should be or what you could be doing. And today allow yourself to simply be. Comparing yourself and your journey may be habitual, but it gets you nowhere. It makes you feel worse and it keeps you stuck. So stop fixating on where everyone else is and start giving yourself permission to be exactly where you are. Quiet the voice telling you to do more and be more, and trust that in this moment, who you are, where you are at, and what you are doing is enough. You will get to where you need to be in your own time. Until then, breathe. Breathe and be patient with yourself and your process. You are doing the best you can to cope and survive amid your struggles. And that's all you can ask of yourself. It's enough. You are enough.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you to Joe for joining us on Conversation Mill today. If you are interested in booking a massage or seeing where Joe is teaching in the Greenville area, you can visit her website at truenorthgreenville.com or follow her on Instagram at truenorthgreenville. Thank you for being a listener of Conversation Mill. The podcast is growing, but we need your continued support in the form of comments, likes, and subscriptions. If you've enjoyed even one episode, please take 2 minutes to comment under the episode or the podcast itself, or rate the podcast. Hitting the subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast helps tremendously. Every like and subscribe helps me support local businesses and local nonprofits by giving them a platform to tell their stories. Together, we can foster the understanding, diversity, and economies that make our individual communities flourish, while creating our own community here at Conversation Mill. Also, you can join us at conversationmill.substack.com, where you can become a member and receive weekly member-only content, including member-only episodes. I look forward to sharing a new conversation with you next week, and as always, thank you for your support.